Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in front of a woman you love and felt like you were speaking two entirely different languages? Like you're trying to show up, do the right thing, say what she needs to hear, but somehow it all lands off. She's hurt and distant. You're confused and exhausted. And you wonder, what am I missing? This isn't about being weak. It's about being human. Because somewhere between our desire to fix things and our fear of getting it wrong, we often lose the very connection we're trying to build. But what if I told you that the answer doesn't lie in learning more tricks or overanalyzing her words, but in understanding yourself, in mastering an ancient, quietly powerful code of emotional clarity? The kind practiced by the Stoics. Yet the Stoics, those thinkers who taught emperors and warriors to remain calm in chaos, to lead with presence and to respond instead of react. Today, I want to show you how that philosophy, when blended with empathy and presence, becomes your secret weapon, not just to understand women, but to finally stop trying to control the relationship and start experiencing it. This is not about domination. It's about emotional leadership. It's not about decoding women. It's about evolving yourself. So let's begin. When you're ready, I'll take you inside. Have you ever noticed how, in the middle of a conversation with a woman, someone you care about deeply, you suddenly find yourself in unfamiliar territory? Maybe it starts with something simple. She says, "I just feel like you're not really here with me lately." You pause. You look at her. You were literally just sitting next to her. You reply, "I'm right here." "What do you mean?" But she sighs, looks down, shakes her head, and now you're in that place again. That invisible place where words fail, where you're trying to navigate emotion with logic. And it's not working. You're not arguing, not yelling, but something has gone missing. Connection, that spark, that effortless understanding that used to come so easily. You feel like a man stuck on a dock, watching a boat drift away, and you don't even remember letting go of the rope. You're not alone. So many men over 30, successful, thoughtful, responsible, come to this quiet, frustrating realization that despite their best intentions, the women in their lives often feel distant, unseen, or worse, misunderstood, and it hurts. Not because you don't care, but because you do. So deeply, in fact, that you start trying to fix it. You offer solutions. You ask if something's wrong. You plan date nights. You buy flowers. You tell her she's beautiful, that she means everything to you. But it still doesn't land. It feels like the more effort you make, the more confused she becomes. Like the emotional GPS keeps rerouting and you're stuck on a loop. Now pause here with me. Just breathe for a moment. What if I told you the issue isn't your actions? It's not what you said or didn't say. It's not that you're broken or bad at love. It's that no one ever taught you how to hold emotional space without collapsing into performance. And even fewer ever told you that women, emotionally, sensually, relationally, don't want perfection. They want presence. And this is where the Stoic enters. Because Stoicism isn't about being cold or detached. That's a myth. Real Stoicism is about mastering the inner world so that you can face the outer one with steadiness, clarity, and yes, tenderness. The Stoic man does not chase emotional control. He creates emotional anchorage. He knows how to stay calm, not to suppress his feelings, but to remain connected through them. And that presence, that centered energy, that is what makes women feel safe, seen, and magnetically drawn to you. Again and again, it's not a game. It's a way of being. Let's begin with something most men never learned: the difference between listening to respond and listening to receive. When a woman opens up to you about her day, her stress, her fears, she's not always asking for solutions. What she craves, what she's often itching for, is resonance. She wants to feel like her inner world matters to someone other than herself, like her story doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be witnessed. A Stoic man doesn't rush to offer answers. He slows down. He breathes. He leans into her words like they are a sacred offering, because in many ways they are. And you may think, well, I'm listening. Isn't that enough? But let me ask you, when you listen, are you waiting for your turn to talk? Or are you making space for her to feel while she speaks? Do you let silence exist? Or do you interrupt it with reassurance, advice, or defensiveness? Presence is silent, but powerful. It's the moment you sit across from her while she cries or speaks or pauses to find the right word, and you don't rush her. You don't look away. You don't fix it. You just hold the moment open with your attention. That's not weakness. That's emotional strength, because most men, especially those who've grown up in a world that rewards performance and punishes vulnerability, have been taught that discomfort must be resolved, that feelings must be solved. But women live inside the feeling. They are in the water, not trying to escape it. And if you want to join her there, to truly know her, you must learn to swim too, not save her from drowning. This brings us to another secret that the Stoics understood well. You cannot master the world until you have mastered your reactions. When a woman expresses frustration, when she says something that feels like criticism or sounds like an accusation, most men go into fight or flight. Defensiveness rises. You feel like you're being misunderstood, accused, or even punished. And what do? You defend, you explain, you try to prove your point. But a Stoic man, he recognizes the deeper invitation, because beneath her words there is often a longing. Do you see how this is affecting me? Do you care enough to slow down? Can you hold my fire without burning me or running from the flame? A woman doesn't want a man who disappears the moment emotions rise. She wants a man who can hold the fire, not fight it, not fear it, but stand calmly beside it, letting it warm him without consuming him. That man, that presence. That's the emotional aphrodisiac that makes a woman feel safe enough to be soft, wild enough to trust her own truth, and open enough to invite you in, not just physically, but emotionally. And I know, this might sound poetic, maybe even abstract, but it's real. And you felt the opposite. You felt the sting of trying to connect and failing. You felt the silence after an argument, the quiet resentment, the feeling of being shut out, even though you thought you were doing everything right. This is not about doing more. It's about being more present, more attuned, more centered in yourself so that you can meet her without needing her to regulate your emotions for you. Now, I want you to imagine this with me. A woman comes home from a stressful day. She walks in, throws her bag on the chair, sighs deeply, and mutters something like, "Everyone's just so fake." She doesn't greet you warmly. She doesn't offer affection. She's clearly overwhelmed. What's your instinct? Do you take it personally and get cold? Do you ask, "Are you mad at me?" Or "What did I do now?" Do you try to cheer her up immediately? Or do you say nothing, but walk over, kiss her on the forehead and say, "You don't have to carry it alone. I'm here." Because that is Stoic emotional leadership. Not fixing, not forcing, simply holding steady. This, my friend, is the beginning of mastery, not because you dominate her, but because you regulate yourself. And in that regulation, you become the safe space where her feminine energy can soften, relax, and open. And from there, something deeper begins to unfold. When a woman feels emotionally safe, she becomes something extraordinary, not just in how she relates to you, but in how she blossoms in her own being. And that safety isn't created by avoiding conflict or agreeing with everything she says. It's created when you, as a man, meet her emotional intensity with inner steadiness. That's when she starts to trust that you're not going to leave when things get hard. That's when she sees you not just as her partner, but as her protector, not of her body, but of her emotional world. Now here's the paradox. The more you try to prove yourself to a woman, especially with words, the more she retreats into skepticism. Not because she doubts your intentions, but because your energy feels performative. You're trying to impress instead of express, trying to convince her instead of connect with her. She can feel it, the subtle tension behind your compliments, the urgency in your need to make things better. And women are attuned to that. They're relational creatures, emotionally sensitive to the smallest shifts in tone, posture, and presence. She may not be able to name it, but she feels when you're disconnected from yourself, even when your words sound right. That's why Stoic mastery doesn't begin with understanding women. It begins with understanding yourself. How do you respond to disconnection? How do you react when she pulls away or when intimacy feels cold? Do you chase her? Withdraw? Do you numb out with distraction or frustration? Do you get louder or do you get smaller? You see, a woman's emotional storm is often an invitation for you to ground, not to correct her, but to come home to yourself. And that kind of man is rare, which is why he's so magnetic. Let me share something I've witnessed over and over in couples therapy. The moment a man learns to sit in his own discomfort without blaming her for it, something powerful happens. The woman starts to soften. Not because he said the right thing, but because he stopped needing her to take care of his feelings. He stopped outsourcing his emotional balance to her behavior. And let me be clear, this is not easy, especially when you love her, when you want to be close, when every part of you wants to solve the tension, to hear her say, "I'm fine," just so you can relax. But you have to understand something profound. Her not being fine isn't a reflection of your failure. It's a reflection of her being human. And when you stop resisting that humanness, when you sit with it, witness it, and stay grounded, you become irresistible. Because now she doesn't have to manage your emotions and hers. She can just be. And in that being, love flows again. Now let's go deeper. One of the most misunderstood parts of masculine energy is the idea that strength means silence. That if you speak too much, if you share your inner world, you'll seem weak. But that's not what Stoicism teaches. It teaches discernment, knowing when to speak and what to speak from. It's not about being mute, it's about being meaningful. When you do share your fears, your doubts, your desires, you're not being emotional. You're being intimate. And intimacy, real intimacy, is the bridge to feminine trust. But here's the catch. It must come from a place of ownership, not neediness. Let me explain. If you say, "I feel like you don't love me the way you used to," it lands as a plea. But if you say, "I've noticed I've been craving more closeness with you lately, and I'd love to explore that together," it lands as a gift. Do you feel the difference? One drains her. The other invites her. So often men suppress their emotional needs until they explode, and then they come out as accusations. That's not masculine, that's misaligned. But when you become aware of your needs before they become pressure and share them without expectation, you become emotionally attractive. You stop asking her to mother your pain, and instead, you become her partner in mutual growth. Now let's talk about boundaries, because this is where many men confuse Stoicism with passivity. Being emotionally steady doesn't mean being emotionally silent. It doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or pretending you're okay with things that wound you. No, it means you honor yourself without dramatizing the situation. Let's say your partner often dismisses your ideas during conversations. Maybe she cuts you off, jokes at your expense, or minimizes your perspective. Instead of snapping or withdrawing, you calmly say, when I share something and feel dismissed, it makes me want to close off. I want to feel like my voice matters to you, just like yours matters to me. That is Stoic boundary setting. No guilt, no aggression, just grounded truth. And here's what's powerful: when you begin expressing your truth without emotional volatility, a woman starts to respect you more, not because you're demanding it, but because you're modeling emotional integrity. You become the mirror in which she sees her own patterns reflected, and that can awaken her into deeper self-awareness. It's not manipulation, it's leadership. You're saying, with your energy and your presence, I love you enough to stay open, and I love myself enough to stay honest. Now, let me ask you this. When was the last time you made her feel like you were not just listening to her words, but to her essence? Women speak in layers. The words are just the first veil. Beneath them is emotion. And beneath that is longing. Often what sounds like anger is pain. What sounds like criticism is craving. And what sounds like distance is actually a plea. Can I trust you to meet me here? Not as a fixer, not as a problem solver, but as a presence. To do that, you must become emotionally bilingual. You must learn to hear not just the noise of her words, but the music underneath. And music requires stillness to appreciate. The Stoic man, when she is speaking, doesn't just nod. He tunes in, he feels, he slows down. And in that slowness, she feels the most intoxicating of all things. Emotional intimacy without pressure. You see, most men go fast because they're uncomfortable. They interrupt, they finish her sentences, they move the conversation towards solutions. But when you slow the tempo, when you invite silence, when you let her complete her emotional sentence without rushing her toward emotional resolution, something beautiful happens. She stops resisting. She starts trusting. And trust is everything, because trust is what opens her body, her heart, her soul. You don't need more lines. You don't need more tricks. You don't need a masterclass in decoding feminine energy. You need to slow down enough to recognize the invitation inside every moment of disconnection. And here's the truth most men are afraid to admit sometimes. Understanding a woman means realizing you can't always understand her, not with logic, not with analysis, not with data, but with presence, with the courage to feel confused and still stay open, with the strength to not have the answer and still be curious. That's not weakness. That's real masculine maturity, and she can feel it. So the next time you're in the middle of a heated moment and you feel the urge to argue or explain or retreat, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what is she really asking from me right now? And then offer that. Because when you master that moment, you don't just become a better partner, you become a deeper man. The strength of a man is not measured by how loud he roars, but by how quietly he listens when everything around him demands a reaction. And in relationships, especially with women, it's in those silent moments, those split seconds between what she says and what you decide to do with it, that the real mastery lives. Let me take you into one of those moments. She says something sharp. Maybe it's a passive-aggressive comment over dinner. Maybe it's a long sigh and a sarcastic, "You're always working late," and it hits you. That familiar sting, that instinct to defend, to say, "You know I'm doing it for us," or "Why are you always complaining?" But right there, between that sting and your reaction, lives a choice. And that choice is the difference between spiraling into a tired argument or creating a moment of deep emotional repair. The Stoic man recognizes that most emotional outbursts from women are not personal attacks, they're bids for connection. Crude, messy, and sometimes misplaced, yes, but bids nonetheless. What she's really saying isn't always in the words, it's in the emotion underneath them. She's asking, can I still reach you? Are you emotionally available to me when I'm at my worst? Will you still stay close when I'm not easy to love? And this is where so many men get it wrong. They think emotional mastery is about detachment, about not letting anything affect you. But that's just numbing. True Stoic strength doesn't mean not feeling. It means not being owned by the feeling. It's the ability to stand still in the center of the storm and say, I feel the wind, I feel the rain, but I'm not running from it. That's how you become unshakable, not by armoring up, but by being grounded. A woman cannot relax into your energy if she feels like she has to edit herself to keep your love. She needs to know that you can handle her, not just the beautiful, sensual parts, but the messy, emotional, contradictory parts too. And if you've ever seen a woman pull away emotionally and you didn't understand why, this might be it. It's not that you weren't good to her. It's that she didn't feel safe showing you the full spectrum of her emotional truth. And so she shrunk, she became quiet, or she became loud. But either way, she stopped trusting that your love could hold her wholeness. But when you stop seeing her emotions as a threat and start seeing them as an opportunity, everything changes. You stop reacting, you start responding. You stop trying to change her feelings, and instead, you learn to be with them. Now, let me bring something to your attention that many men overlook. A woman's desire is not sustained by routine comfort. It is sustained by emotional polarity, not chaos, not drama, but contrast, meaning she needs to feel that your masculine presence is distinct enough from hers to create magnetism. And that polarity doesn't come from dominance or bravado. It comes from depth. When you have your own emotional world, your own passions, your own rituals of growth, you stop orbiting around her moods. You stop needing her to validate your worth. And that makes you incredibly attractive. Because here's the truth, women don't want to be the center of your universe. They want to trust that your universe is rich, stable and alive, even without them. They want to be invited into it, not be responsible for keeping it spinning. If your energy rises and falls entirely based on how she treats you that day, you're not grounded, you're dependent. And dependency is not the same as connection. So what's the alternative? You cultivate your inner world, you build rituals that make you stronger, calmer, and more emotionally spacious. You read, you train, you reflect, you spend time in silence, you journal, you explore what you believe, what you want, and what kind of man you're becoming. And when you show up to the relationship from that place, not needing her to complete you, but wanting to share your fullness with her, she feels it. In your eyes, in your voice, in your silence. She feels it in the way you hold eye contact, in the way you pause before speaking, in the way you don't get rattled when she tests you, not to hurt you, but to feel your edges. Because yes, she will test you. Not because she's cruel, but because the feminine tests the masculine to feel the depth of its strength. She wants to know, are you still here with me? Can I feel you even when I push against you? She doesn't want a wall. She wants a container. And when you pass that test, not with aggression, not with avoidance, but you become the man she relaxes into, the man she confides in, the man she respects and desires. Because trust me, emotional depth is sexy. A man who knows himself, who owns his shadows, who isn't afraid to be seen. He's rare. And a woman can sense that. She can sense when a man has faced his own demons and didn't run. When he's made peace with his past and doesn't need her to heal it. That's the man she wants to build with. But here's the last thing I want you to sit with for now. Women, remember how you make them feel more than what you say. You might think your effort is in the gestures, the explanations, the apologies, but her body, her nervous system, remember something else. Did she feel safe around you? Did she feel understood? Did she feel like her emotions had room to exist? Or did she feel like she had to shrink to keep the peace? You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present, consistently, authentically, calmly. Because once she knows she can express her storm and you won't collapse, she stops needing the storm. And in its place comes softness, vulnerability, radiance, love. Because the greatest Stoic secret is this: your emotional stillness creates space for her emotional freedom. And that's not just understanding women. That's loving them in a way that heals. There's a moment in every relationship when you start to see the real person behind the romantic ideal. It's the moment when the infatuation fades and what's left is not just desire, but depth or the absence of it. And this is where so many relationships quietly begin to crumble, not because of betrayal or cruelty, but because of emotional boredom. A kind of flatness, a slow, quiet erosion of polarity. And this is where the Stoic lover thrives, not because he resists emotion, but because he brings fresh presence to the ordinary. You see, women don't fall out of love because you stop taking her to fancy dinners. They fall out of love when you stop noticing her. Noticing, not just when she puts on something new or changes her hair, but noticing how she moves when she's tired, how her voice softens when she's unsure, how she walks differently when she's excited, and most of all, how she longs to feel chosen again. Because we forget this. Women don't just want to be loved, they want to feel wanted, actively, regularly, with reverence, not just routine. And you can't give that if you're living in your head all the time, thinking of what to say next or what went wrong last week. You can't love her in the present moment if you're stuck reliving past arguments or planning future conflicts. The Stoic man returns to now. Over and over again, he sees her, not just with his eyes, but with his presence. And when he touches her, it's not habit, it's intention. When he speaks to her, it's not autopilot, it's embodiment. And she feels it. She feels when your attention is full. And let me tell you, there's nothing more erotic to a woman than feeling truly seen by a man who isn't trying to fix her, possess her, or impress her. Just see her, because when she feels your presence, not your performance, that's when she softens. That's when her walls come down. That's when her fire returns. Not because you demanded it, but because you inspired it. But here's the catch, and it's a hard truth: you cannot give this kind of presence to her if you have not given it to yourself. Have you ever really sat in silence with yourself? Not with music, not with a screen, not with a distraction, but with your own raw self. Have you asked yourself, where am I avoiding pain? Where am I clinging to control? Where have I mistaken pleasing for intimacy? Because if you haven't done that inner excavation, then everything you give her, your attention, your love, your words, will come with an unconscious price tag. You will ask for something back: approval, reassurance, gratitude, affection. And the moment she doesn't give it, you will collapse into resentment or self-doubt. True emotional mastery means this: I give from overflow, not from emptiness. I show up because it's who I am, not because I need a certain response. And women, they feel that immediately. The man who gives from fullness becomes a sanctuary. The man who gives from need becomes a liability. So you have to ask yourself honestly, what kind of man do I want to be? Do I want to be the man who gets quiet when he doesn't get his way? Who withdraws touch, affection, and words when she's in a mood? Or do I want to be the man who remains open-hearted even when she's distant, who holds his own emotional integrity even when hers is wavering? This doesn't mean becoming a doormat. This doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or becoming passive. It means learning the sacred art of discernment, knowing when a moment calls for strength and when it calls for softness. A Stoic lover knows when to say nothing and when to speak from the deepest place in his soul. He doesn't play emotional games. He plays for truth. Now let's talk about the unspoken, often terrifying topic for many men: rejection. So many of you fear being emotionally vulnerable because you believe it leads to rejection. But here's the twist: what women reject is not your emotion, it's your disowning of it. When you bury it, when you deny it, when it comes out sideways through sarcasm, passive aggression, or emotional shutdown. Women don't need you to be stone, they need you to be solid. Solid doesn't mean cold, it means centered, honest, responsible for your own emotional state. If you say to a woman, I feel disconnected from you, from a place of desperation, it feels like a burden. But if you say it from a place of grounded self-awareness, it feels like an invitation. She can feel the difference between please fix this and I want to meet you here. And that second one, that's the portal. That's where deep love lives. So when you feel scared to share, scared to be seen, scared to reveal your hurt, ask yourself, am I seeking her permission to feel this? Or am I offering her a piece of who I truly am? Because one is a request, the other is a gift. And women, they crave that gift, crave it in their bones, the rare sacred gift of a man fully revealed, not polished, not perfect, just present. And here's the thing, if she can't meet you there, if she turns away from that truth, then that's not a failure on your part, it's a revelation, a beautiful, painful, liberating revelation. And in that moment, your job is not to fight for her approval. Your job is to remain in truth even if it costs you her comfort, because the man who chooses truth over temporary peace is the man who becomes unforgettable. He's the one she remembers years later, not for the gifts, not for the dates, but for how she felt when she looked into his eyes and saw that he saw her, that he didn't flinch, that he didn't run, that he stayed emotionally, energetically, silently. And in that staying, something eternal was born. The greatest tragedy in modern love isn't betrayal. It isn't even heartbreak. It's the quiet, invisible disconnection between two people who still care for each other, but no longer know how to reach one another. It's the man lying next to the woman he loves, wondering why she feels miles away. And it's the woman lying beside a man who looks like safety, but doesn't feel like home anymore. You see, love doesn't die with a scream. It dies with a sigh. And that sigh usually sounds like, I'm fine. But it's not fine. It hasn't been fine in a long time. She just stopped telling you, and maybe you stopped asking. But not because you stopped loving her. You were just tired. Tired of getting it wrong. Tired of not being enough. Tired of giving what you thought she needed only to be met with more confusion, more tension, more silence. And you started asking yourself that question all men eventually ask when they love deeply but feel distant. What more can I do? But my dear friend, this was never about doing more. It was about being more present, more emotionally literate, more grounded in your truth, and less afraid of hers. Because understanding women is not about decoding behavior. It's about decoding presence. She doesn't need you to predict her every emotional shift. She needs to feel that no matter what she's feeling, you don't disappear, that you don't abandon yourself or her when it gets hard. And here's the paradox of true masculine presence. The more anchored you are, the more you allow her to be free. Free to be wild, free to be soft, free to feel everything she's feeling without censoring herself for your comfort. And in that freedom, she gives you her heart, not as a transaction, but as a response. Because you became a man she doesn't have to walk on eggshells around. A man she doesn't have to teach how to love her. A man who doesn't need a playbook because he leads with presence, not performance. And maybe no one ever told you this, but presence is the most erotic quality a man can offer. Not his looks, not his wealth, not even his words, but his presence. Can you be with her fully, with your eyes, your body, your energy, even when she's moody, irrational, emotional, or in pain? Can you hold the weight of her storm without making her feel like a burden? Can you invite her to share more? Not because you're obligated, but because you genuinely want to know her world. That's intimacy. And intimacy is not found in grand gestures. It's found in tiny, daily acts of emotional curiosity. It's in the way you put your phone down when she walks into the room, the way you pause before responding, the way you gently touch her back when she's lost in thought, the way you say, I hear you, instead of, you're overreacting. It's in the way you allow her to change and choose to love her anyway. But that kind of intimacy requires something that scares many men. It requires emotional transparency. You cannot ask her to open her heart if you're unwilling to open yours. You cannot expect her to soften if you're hiding behind silence and pride. You cannot build a life with someone you don't let see your soul. And yes, I know, vulnerability feels dangerous, especially for men raised in a world where strength was defined as stoicism, but misinterpreted as suppression. You were taught that emotions are a liability, that sensitivity is weakness, that sharing your truth is risky. And you were right, it is risky. But so is love. And you can't have one without the other. You want to understand women? Then start by understanding this. Every woman is, in some way, asking the same 3 questions, whether she speaks them or not. Can I trust you with my truth? Will you still love me when I'm not easy to love? Can I be fully myself with you and still be safe? If she senses a yes even in your silence, you've already mastered more than most men ever will. Because you've become the space, not just the man. You've become the lighthouse in her storm, the warm presence in her chaos, the steady rhythm when her world feels too fast. And in return, she will love you in a way that melts every mask you ever thought you needed. Because she doesn't want the performance. She wants you. The real you, the one who shows up even when it's messy, the one who listens even when it's uncomfortable, the one who stays even when he doesn't understand. And if there's one thing I hope you remember from all of this, it's this: you don't have to be perfect to be loved. You just have to be present. And that presence, calm, grounded, emotionally attuned, is the deepest gift you can offer a woman. Because she won't remember the arguments, the details, or even the words. She'll remember how you made her feel when she was lost. How you looked at her when she doubted herself. How you touched her when she didn't feel worthy. She'll remember the you that didn't run, that didn't hide, that chose to stay. So if you're asking, what's the Stoic secret to understanding women? It's this: don't try to understand her first. Understand you, because the moment you master your inner world, the feminine begins to trust you with hers. And in that space, love becomes a living thing, breathing, transforming, rooted not in control but in freedom, not in roles but in resonance, not in rules but in reverence. So breathe, be still, and love with your presence. That's the real secret. And it was never hidden. It was just waiting for you to slow down and listen.